Hello and welcome to episode 3 of Mindful Meeting Podcast. I'm your host, King Abu. The topic of discussion for today is rather delicate and confusing, to say the least, but worry not because we have an experienced and talented guest today who will join us and will shed some light on this very topic. Today we introduce Anika Munshi, and guys, her resume is quite impressive. She's a licensed professional counselor, has a master's degree in clinical mental health counseling. She's also known best for her keen insight, authenticity, humanistic, and straightforward and problem solving approach. She is quite ambitious, guys, and we're not even done yet because she's also the founder of Sukoon Circles, a project to increase mental health awareness in the Muslim community with the perspectives of religion, culture, and gender. Anika is also a graphic designer and founder of Rahman Designs, where she has served the Muslim community with modern visual dawah for over 10 years. She's pretty much a one woman army. She's got it all together. MashaAllah. Anika, I must say, I'm totally in love with the names you have selected for your companies. Sukoon Circles and Rahman Design. I love it.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, of course. And finally, Anika also values each individual's unique experiences, and her approach is empowerment focused, culturally sensitive, research oriented, and spiritually integrated. Sister Anika, it's an honor to have you on the show. Welcome. Of
It's an honor to be here. Thank you so much.
course. Um, so before we get started, I have a riddle for you. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
All right. Okay, so first, think of the color of the clouds. Okay. All right. Next, think of the color of snow. You with me so far?
Yes.
All right. Now think about the color of a bright full moon.
Okay.
All right. Now answer quickly. What do cows drink?
Milk? I
Oh
was
my
like, is
God,
this a
this
racist
never
joke?
fails. It never fails.
I was like, Nick was saying white, white, white.
Exactly. That's the whole point of it. You're fixated with the color white, and milk comes to mind because that's what cows make. But they don't drink milk; they drink water.
Oh, what do girls drink? I was
This is awesome. I love it. So
that's good. I like that.
yeah, me too. So Anika, if you don't mind, can you share with us, me and the audience, your journey on how you got to this point? What made you become a therapist?
Wow. Okay. So I think that my answer is that, life happened to me. There's nothing special about it. And in my search for the truth, I went through many years of therapy and I learned a lot about myself. And I also read everything that I could find related to the subject. And I just dug deeper because I wanted to understand why I went through what I went through. And throughout the process, I decided to become trained as a life coach and speak to whoever would want to speak to me. And alhamdulillah, I spoke to a lot of women and men in different countries around the world, alhamdulillah. And I
MashaAllah.
learned yeah, and I learned that, I was pretty good at talking about the subject of narcissism. So something about that subject. But I also now I had all these reference points for all these different people out there, and I kept searching for answers. And at this point, I decided that I might as well become a therapist. So I got a degree in mental health counseling and attended trainings. I even worked at the local police department's counseling center, where I got a lot of good experience and a good handle on understanding how, abuse and neglect, and even, of course, narcissism, how it affects individuals, families, and communities. And today, um, coincidentally, my specialty is to work with folks who have self esteem issues, who have been abused or neglected, experienced narcissists in their life, and are themselves searching for answers. So with that, I also on the side started my own passion project, which is Sukoon Circles. And to me, that's the way that I educate my people about the dynamics of abuse and narcissism and how it affects our own human development, our relationships, our spirituality, and a lot of different aspects of our lives. And I examine narcissism from the aspects of culture, gender, religion. And I'm still learning more every day. So not an expert by any means.
Very modest, mashallah. I'm intrigued by those names. Is there a backstory to Sukoon Circles and Rahman Designs?
So Rahma comes
Oh,
from
Rahma, sorry.
compassion, right? The word Rahma is compassion. My son's last name is Rahman. So
Oh,
maybe there's
mashallah.
some of that to do with that. But I also like the idea of Rahma, compassion. The idea behind that was I was one of the first few only, Muslim designers who worked for Muslim businesses and organizations.
Mm,
And I felt like at that time, the designers were, if they were non-Muslim, they were doing very cliche designs. And so um, me being a Muslim myself, my designs are very different. And by the way, I have a bachelor's in architecture, so I have design in my blood. So
mashallah.
that was that. And but on the other hand, Sukoon Circle, like I was really thinking about the name, and I actually have on my website like an explanation of that name because to me the word Sukoon, it's an Arabic word. It's also an Arabic symbol. Part of when we're reciting the Quran, a sukoon is a place of pause where you stop. So when you recite and you say at or ab, it's followed by a pause. And so, for example, in the flow of language itself, you need several pauses to create sound of the language itself. So
Hmm.
sukoon had that meaning. Also, to me, sukoon is part of sakina. It's part of the du'a that Ibrahim alayhi salam made about wanting peace and tranquility for his family when he
Right.
left Hajar al-Islam in the desert. So there's also that. And to me, Sukoon is a place of pause, of tranquility, of peace for, the victims of abuse that I talk to, victims of narcissism, etc. Is that it's a place that they can create for themselves. So it's kind of like a circle, a space, a garden for themselves, if you will,
Yeah,
where they can use that to kind of push themselves forward. So,
inshallah. Yeah, may Allah give us all that peace, inshallah. So you might as well be the host of this show because I forgot to mention the topic, but you already mentioned it. So before we delve deep into the topic, I would like to understand what the definition is and what we're even dealing with. So if you don't mind, can you define what narcissism is?
so narcissism itself is a loose term that's been generally characterized by a person who has a grandiose view of themselves. They also lack empathy. They have a sense of entitlement. They have a need, admiration, or attention. But the clinical definition, the clinical term is narcissistic personality disorder. But we reserve that for individuals who are on the severe end of the spectrum. Whereas you see a lot of folks today use the word narcissist very loosely. But generally
Okay.
speaking, we can speak of two types of narcissists. We have the grandiose type and the vulnerable type. And the grandiose types, while they may be the ones who are extroverted, seeking dominance, attention, or admiration, they may be in the pursuit of attention or power. But we need to understand that not everyone who does these things is narcissistic. Some people do those same things to reach their full potential or to help make other people's lives better. But narcissistic people are those who seek status and attention with what they're doing. So, for example, if they're in a position where, say, their rosy view of themselves is challenged,
Mm,
their reaction, which may be resentful, or aggressive, that's what that's how you can kind of tell, possibly narcissism, for example, um, can show up in the family. For instance, when a parent is trying to seek attention and admiration through their children, Or, for example, if every time someone tried to help, you feel attacked, insulted, or disrespected. And so in return, you incur your wrath upon that person or use violence against them. That would kind of be how a narcissist responds. So the definition is there, but I would reserve um, that diagnosis or the diagnosing ability for therapists themselves. I feel like people throw this term around quite a lot. Whereas, even as therapists ourselves, we don't jump to call someone a narcissist. We want to be able to consider the context, and even then, we still don't label that person that way,
Mhm.
because maybe that person is asserting their wants and needs. They may be incorrectly be labeling themselves as a narcissist, um,
Interesting.
and then they might feel unloved themselves and might see everyone else around them as a narcissist. Or even they could be from a culture where the men are dominant. So
Mhm.
if a woman decides to be confident, then they call her a narcissist. So we really need to consider the context and people's perception of this.
I see. You mentioned something interesting about someone misrepresenting themselves as a narcissist. How does that happen?
So I get asked this all the time from my clients, especially women. They ask me, they're like, "Am I the narcissist?"
Yeah.
And I always tell my clients, I'm like, I don't like that question. I don't like answering that question because putting a label on you doesn't help you to learn or to grow or to come out of this. And even, labeling that person, your husband or your wife or whoever, it doesn't really help us accomplish the goal that we want here. So
But
mm,
by labeling it or at least giving it a name or something like that, wouldn't that be the objective? Or maybe not objective, but wouldn't you want that so you can address that?
true. But imagine if I went up to, say, my husband and I said, "Husband, I think you're a narcissist." If he truly is a narcissist, he's gonna
Well,
attack,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
Defend
absolutely.
himself. So I've just found that even using that term is quite problematic. You
Mm,
know, it doesn't it doesn't provide the type of change that we're looking for. And that's what I have a theory that maybe using the word narcissist makes us feel safe that the other person is the problem, and it takes the attention away from us.
it's like a
So,
defense mechanism in a way,
yeah, and I'm not saying that, both people or both sides are the problem. I am saying though that both sides play a part
right?
this person's behavior.
Hmm. Makes sense. So, where does it stem from? What's the root cause of it?
So depending on how you look at it, I in my studies I've learned that narcissism, the definition of the word narcissism actually comes from the psychoanalytic theory, which is originally Freud's theory.
Hmm.
But the problem is that you can look at this thing, narcissism, and look at it from all the different theories of psychology that have come out since then. Okay, and we have like six or seven major theories, and new ones every day. So, for example, if we look at it through Carl Jung's theory, the narcissist may have a mother complex. Okay, according to feminist theory, this may be a larger societal problem, and it's a problem that exists in patriarchal cultures and can be labeled as abuse. According to attachment theory, this person might have an insecure attachment style. And family therapists might say that this person comes from a dysfunctional family and is replaying generational trauma through dysfunctional roles. And then you have modern neuroscience and trauma informed therapy, which will say that this person is a wounded child. They've experienced trauma, or they've experienced developmental trauma. So, either way, we're learning so much about this problem from all these different perspectives, but each perspective offers a different set of solutions.
Interesting. How do you, in your professional opinion, why do you think there's so much? I don't know if ambiguity is the right word or different theories, I guess, why for just one thing? Why are we not able to, I guess, in a way, agree on what it is or how to even identify it?
I think that the way that we see the problem has changed according to the historical context, the political context. And so, I mean, during Freud's time, they defined this problem differently because of that sociopolitical context. Whereas today, you have gender roles shifting around. So we're going to look at it from that angle. And each time and place might look at the problem differently. So, I'm from India. So back home, I know right now there's a good like feminist movement happening there, but in previous generations, they might not have conceptualized this problem as a problem in the first place. They might have said, well, this is
Right,
just our culture,
right,
you know.
exactly. Okay,
So even calling it a problem, defining the problem itself, it's not so much the disagreement on our side, at least that's how I see it. It's more so how do we convey this to people so that they can hear it?
right, okay. Well, I can see why it can be very confusing.
Yeah.
So how do we make sense of all of this? What do you see, or how do you see the problem?
The way I see the problem is that it goes back how we exercise power over others, the control over others. And, as a Muslim, I understand that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He mentions in the Quran that several verses say that, He gave rank to us. He gave some of us rank only to test us, you know? And I feel as if narcissism is a disease of the heart. And it shows up, as we know, in the forms of hypocrisy, of arrogance, self
Right,
deceit, and imposing that person's will over Allah's will. So, at its very core, I feel that narcissism boils down to a person really saying, I am better than you.
right, exactly.
And so, in the Quran, we know that Iblis was the first one who said this. He's like, fire is better than clay, you
Yeah,
know? And so, we could say that this is a problem as old as time itself, you know? And
indeed.
yeah. And so, it shows up in so many different ways. A person might say, well, my culture is better than your culture, or my
Right.
race or my abilities or beliefs are better than yours. And then the question is, well, what is this person willing to do when the truth strikes them? Or
Mm,
how far are they willing to go to assert themselves over others? Like, will they, like Iblis, refuse a direct commandment by God? So is our belief of being better than others going to inflict pain and punishment over others? Are we willing to kill another human being, for instance? Are we willing to sacrifice others for our well-being? So it's what happens after that thought.
right. You mentioned that it might be a disease in the heart, right? And I was wondering, would it be a fair assessment to assert that narcissism is more of a spiritual condition or ailment as
Mhm.
opposed to medical condition, or is both the the reality? Could it be both, or is this more a spiritual ailment?
So I'm definitely not a scholar, but um, I can share with you that I think that a lot of the spiritual and the psychological overlap. Um,
Mm,
the reason that we don't like to say that is because that doesn't mean that a mental health problem is a spiritual problem, necessarily. Because
got
I
it.
hear a
Okay.
lot of folks say that, well, I'm depressed. And other people will say to this person, well, you're depressed because you don't believe in God,
Yeah,
right?
you don't have good faith, or yeah.
Exactly. So I don't like saying it like that, but I
Okay.
do believe that there are a lot of spiritual elements to narcissism. But then again, I also would have to say there are a lot of those socio-political beliefs and values, environmental influences that play a part in kind of teaching narcissism.
Mm,
And the way it is today, I feel like a lot of it has to do with our ideas of what it means to be strong and weak, for instance. So, for example, I wanted to share this is that, back in the days, men were told that being close to their mom made them weak.
Right.
Okay. And then the father's role was to break the mother son bond and teach them discipline and teach them how to conceal their emotions. And maybe that was functional back then because we wanted men to be ready for battle and they needed to be willing to sacrifice themselves for their honor, and treat their battle scars like trophies. And, like maybe the women then learned that in these environments that, I can't really show love. I must emotionally detach from my sons so that I can secure their manhood, you
Right.
know? There's a lot of elements to that. And I'm not trying to say that narcissism is a man's problem. Absolutely not. I definitely see women, especially women who are older or maybe have a certain status, maybe the status of a mother or a mother in law or elder sister or sister in law. And sometimes that power dynamic is what creates that narcissistic relationship with others.
Got it. So then, how do we protect ourselves and heal from narcissism?
So every situation is different. So we have to keep that in mind. But in severe cases, it is important to protect our physical and our mental health to make sure that we're not harmed in the process. Whereas in other cases, in not so severe cases, we may be able to emotionally separate from these people. Maybe this person is a family member, and we're unable to fully separate ourselves from them, or we're working towards a separation or something. So each situation, it really depends on how much power that person has over your life, and how much power you have. It also might depend on how much you need from them and how much they need from you. But in every situation with a narcissist, it's a relationship where it becomes an attack on that person's sense of self, on their personal willpower, and their ability to have control over themselves. So healing for that person, when they come to therapy, is about learning first how to take care of themselves. Do they need to give up any addictions, for instance? Okay. Unhealthy habits, do they need to focus on eating and sleeping well, or managing their finances, or making sure that their children are physically protected from harm, or generally organizing their life so that it's not just an attack on their way of being?
Yeah.
It's also about looking at that person's thought processes and how they handle emotions. So the therapist might ask that person certain questions, like, you know, is that person um, playing a part in enabling this other person's behavior?
Yeah.
Is this person's thoughts, out of whack, out of line, and how they think about themselves or others? Like, do they have very catastrophic thinking? Maybe do they have like violent thoughts themselves, you know,
Mm.
or do they beat themselves up?
Yeah.
And we want to ask, you know, is it possible that we have been programmed to expect this kind of behavior in others? Like, are we programmed to expect narcissists in our lives? Did our parents deal with a narcissist in their life? How did they handle it? So this person might need to unlearn certain beliefs and adopt new ones. And they also may need to learn after that how to confront situations like this out there. So for that person, it might look like learning how to set boundaries, speaking assertively, learning how to be vulnerable, when to trust, when not to trust, how to handle power responsibly. Also, we can help that person to learn more about the world, how the world works, about the narcissist and why maybe they became a narcissist, how to break the cycle to make sure that their children don't follow that pattern. But alhamdulillah, the women that I have counseled, alhamdulillah, after, it takes a while, change doesn't happen overnight.
Right.
But I do notice that the end goal is to help them to feel more vulnerable, more compassionate, empowered, internally strong, and feel connected and protected in their relationships.
Wow. That's beautiful. That's music to my ears, because one of the reasons I was doing this podcast is to offer women in general, but specifically Muslim women, a platform to do exactly what you're doing right now. So when I heard these type of stories where Alhamdulillah, Allah is utilizing you as a vessel, so to speak, to empower other women, that's very inspiring. I hope you continue to do that good work, inshallah. So every company or manufacturer, when they create an item or object, they have a manual guide for it, right? There's
Mhm.
never anything you buy without a manual guide. So that we learn how to operate that particular item. And I think our creator, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, if he was quote unquote the manufacturer and we are his products, his creation, he
Mhm.
also gave us a manual guide, which is the Quran. So when you look at the Quran, is there any passages or are there any passages or instances where Allah is addressing this topic we're addressing today?
Yeah, definitely. Like I mentioned before, Iblis was the first narcissist, you could say.
Yes,
Um,
definitely.
and he was the grandiose type, right?
Yeah,
And we're taught in the Quran that he is the antithesis of what we're supposed to be, as Muslims.
right.
Okay, so we have that example in the Quran, which is a very detailed, beautiful example. And then we have the story of Musa alayhi salam, which is one of my favorite stories of the Quran, and it's one of the also the most often mentioned stories as well.
Yeah.
And I gather so many lessons out of the story, by the way, because the way I see it is that you have this like adopted child of a narcissist, going through a lot of the same stages that we all do to overcome and, confront and resist and strengthen ourselves and come out of that abusive cycle. And
Mhm.
so you see Musa alayhi salam and Bani Israel going through a lot of these different stages of protection, of connection, of healing, and moving forward. So yeah, I see so many lessons. So for example, Musa alayhi salam was raised in the house of Fir'aun, and he witnessed the oppression of his people. He was raised to be an extension of Fir'aun so that one day he could carry a position of power. And Allah blessed him with power and strength while growing up. But there was an incident, where he killed a man, and his power and strength couldn't protect him. And he was forced to leave and seek a new way of life. And at that time, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala empowered him with a staff and a brave heart. And Musa alayhi salam could have just left and made a life for himself and lived out there. But he went back and he faced his people's abuser, okay, Fir'aun. And when Fir'aun, faced that resistance from him, he tried to crush this guy's spirit, and he made him face Musa alayhi salam with like 70 magicians. And when I see that instance of Musa alayhi salam versus all these 70 magicians, I'm thinking about psychological abuse. Okay. So Fir'aun tries to make Musa in that situation feel like he's helpless. But no, Musa alayhi salam doesn't give up. With the help of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he's able to show his people and also he's able to show his people that reality. Okay. And so for a lot of victims of abuse, I feel like what's happening in that dynamic is that there's a war against their version of reality. It's the narcissist who's twisting facts and telling them what they can think and feel or can't feel, and that really skews with a person's sense of self, their reality of the world. And they do this to weaken us and to empower them. Okay. But Musa alayhi salam, is the example of a person who overcame that. And at his weakest, when Pharaoh's army was chasing him and Bani Israel, all the people, I would say that that's a time where he realized that he really doesn't have all of the control. And at that time, he fully, truly, in his heart and his mind, had to submit to the one who has control over all of the universe. And so at that time, Musa alayhi salam fully submitted to that control and trusted in Allah. And at that moment, Allah split the sea for him. And that miracle shows Allah's power, you know, the power that he has, which is greater than any one of his creations. And even after that, Muslim Islam is tested. And we learn that when we're with a narcissist and we've like had been in a relationship with them, even if that person leaves, even if the abuser leaves, we still hold some remnants of that ideology, of that way of being. And if we don't seek healing from that, we're going to fall right back into that dynamic. Okay. So
Wow.
Bani Israel, for example, they tested Musa Islam in this way. So once the abuser is gone, Fir'aun's gone, they were still acting like abused people. And they wanted to give their power to anything or everything. And so they made like this golden calf and they wanted to give away their power, even if it's to an inanimate object. So again, there's so many lessons I can share from the story of Musa alayhi salam because I just feel like it is the story of narcissism.
And Fir'aun just being the epitome of narcissism. Wow. So he was the stepdad, I guess, of Nabi Musa, peace be upon him.
Mhm.
But if our parents, our own parents, were and still are narcissistic folks, right? Will we also adapt that as well? Or is it something we learn, or are we born with it because our parents exhibit those behaviors as well?
Yeah, that's a tough question. I get that asked a lot. So there's definitely a strong connection between narcissism and that parent-child attachment relationship.
Mm,
So a huge factor of creating narcissism is the environment. And what we've learned is that even if narcissism is not the problem of a person itself, it's the problem of a system. So there's a lot of other things happening. So we can't say, oh, it is the parent's fault. Of course not.
got it.
That parent is part of a larger system.
Mhm.
But when one person in the home is narcissistic, for example, the father or the mother, then that person has the potential to disrupt the entire family system and pass the dysfunctional style to everyone who is involved. Okay. Each person in that family system will have an unhealthy idea of themselves. Either they will think of themselves as better than or less than,
Mm,
of their needs and wants being more important or less important, of their feelings being prioritized or denied. So you're going to see one or the other. And when you have that person with that version, their distorted reality, not only can it impact that family, but it can impact their family's family, which can impact the entire culture. Okay. Now, I'm not
right.
saying there's a death sentence to everyone out there. Everyone's going to be narcissistic. But what I'm trying to say is that this problem is pervasive. It's already
Mhm.
out there everywhere. But simplistically, if there's anything that I can offer to console our mothers and our fathers, it is that you can really empower your child with love. Okay. When you show a healthy version of love to them and they feel connected with you, then no matter the narcissist out there, this individual, inshallah, will become resilient.
Inshallah.
Those experiences to inshallah, empower others.
Inshallah. So when we talk about narcissism, right? Is that the same thing as being arrogant? Are the two words interchangeable?
Yeah, all the time. I feel like that's the way that we use that word. But a person can believe that they are better than others or feel more important than others, but still not be called narcissistic. Yeah, I know
Hmm.
that's confusing.
Yeah.
So the word narcissism, it has to do with a set of behaviors, right? Arrogance is one of them. So
Oh, so arrogance is like under the umbrella of narcissism.
yeah, yeah.
Okay.
Because it's
Okay.
also about how that arrogance shows up in that person's relationships,
Uh-huh.
or at their work or, in their personal lives, for instance. So then we also need to look at some other things. Okay, so what I see most often is a person comes in and they tell me that, other people have been calling them selfish or disrespectful or arrogant, most
Hmm.
likely their family members. And the reason is because they were actually considering their own needs, wants, or feelings. Okay. So in a family system, with a mother, father, whatever, is that if this person expresses their needs, wants, or feelings, automatically that person of authority is going to shoot them down and call them disrespectful, selfish, arrogant.
Hmm.
And so we know that it's not this person, it's the other person, the narcissist, who's twisting the reality so that the other people focus on them. They want the attention and admiration at the end of the day.
Hmm.
And this person might even use religion to shame that person and tell them that it's your job to sacrifice your needs, and you're supposed to be patient, and you're supposed to submit to the authority of others. And all of this is not done for the right reasons. It's done so that they can be the center of attention. So like I'm saying, narcissism is a loaded term. I don't encourage people to go out there and use it, because even with us, there are so many different markers before you can even make that as a diagnosis.
So I can see then that being confused with being confident, right?
All the time. Yeah.
Wow.
So that's especially with women. With men, that might not be so much of an issue. If they're acting arrogant, oh, they're just being a man. Whereas if a woman is confident, then someone has polluted her mind, or she's mentally,
Mm.
she's disrespectful,
It
you
has
know?
been beguiled. Okay. Got it. Okay. So, speaking of men and women,
Mhm.
what happens in the case where a woman and men are dating, right? And then let's say the man is exhibiting these narcissistic traits, and the woman calls him out on it, but then he deflects and projects it on her and says things like, well, no, that's just your insecurity, this, that, the next, you're just a jealous person, whatever, right? How does she handle that situation? Hopefully in a civil way.
It is very difficult, let me tell you.
Yeah,
When somebody is, quote, criticizing you, it's important to look at how it's done, you
right.
know, because you can tell with what intention possibly this person is saying it, and then it's up to us to be able to take either that criticism and check, well, is this correct? Is this something that might be true? Could I work on this? Or is this person trying to make me shift and change for their benefit?
Hmm.
So I would say there's like a mental checklist that at least I tell, the women that I talk to go through in their heads. Also, I add, like, to check in with your feelings, your intuition. If you feel like something's off
Yeah,
about, the way this person is speaking to you, then if that person is saying you're insecure, I would first check in with yourself. Is Do you feel like this person's words and their actions do not match up? You know, but for us to even do all of this, it does require a level of security, absolutely. And unfortunately, women have been told for generations to do whatever it takes to get married. There's way too much pressure on us to get married. Whereas I do see there are some changes in today's time. I see women who are learning to stand up for themselves at the beginning of the relationship, in that dating phase, you could say. And they are expecting equal treatment. So if she's expected to shift a little bit, well, so is he. And the idea is to move towards one another in the
right.
relationship. It's not just that, if he has concerns, she's supposed to, shift and change herself. It's more like both individuals have needs and wants and feelings. Well, how are we going to discuss that? How are we going to work through that, and move towards one another? So it's a process. And if we kind of learn about ourselves, we're able to better gauge the other person.
Yeah. I'm gonna mention the name of a scholar that a lot of Muslims will not be pleased with. Um, but it's an individual that I follow closely. I don't necessarily agree with everything this author says, but I will quote something that came to mind as you were speaking. I'm talking about Ershad Manji. She wrote a book. One of her books was "The Trouble with Islam Today," and
Mm.
in that book, there's a sentence she says, "His insecurities become her problems," and it sounds like that's what's been happening. And Alhamdulillah, I'm happy that we're, beginning to open our eyes to these realities and things are shifting and changing. And while we've made progress, I think we still have a long ways to go, but I think we're headed in the right direction.
Yeah,
Um,
I definitely
yeah, go
think
ahead.
we still have we still have a lot of this out there, but we're seeing a lot of change. But
Alhamdulillah.
there's a lot of resistance and
Hmm.
judgment on each side. So hopefully by the next generation, it's a little bit better.
Inshallah, inshallah. So, can narcissists improve?
Man, so this question, okay? I'm just going to make a disclaimer is that you have some people who will bring up these statistics, okay? So you have the statistic of women, the batterers program, okay? Is that, for example, folks who get into domestic violence, they're court ordered to go to these batterers program. And some of the data that comes out of this is that only 3% of those guys actually make sustained change in their lives. Okay. So you have a group of people who will say, that person's a narcissist, run the other way, they're never going to change. On the other hand, we have a growing movement of people saying that if this person, due to whatever reason in their life, are able to have an honest reflection of themselves. Okay, so maybe this person goes through some crisis or hardship, or after the divorce, he or she realizes some things about themselves. That can be positive change. If that person is learning how to care for others, I think that's a good marker of going against the narcissistic tendencies to even to practice compassion towards others, to hold others needs, wants and feelings as important equally. So unfortunately what I hear from a lot of women is that they feel that he will change overnight, or that he will change after maybe listening to a few Islamic lectures or a few therapy sessions. um, I have bad news for those folks, because this stuff is deeply rooted. You're not going to see immediate change. But is it possible? Absolutely is possible. But he or she must want to change
Right.
themselves. Okay.
Absolutely.
Also, what I see is a lot of people dragging that person into therapy, you know? And I have to make the disclaimer is that, I can't force anyone to change. That's not my job. It's not my job to advise or control. I mean, that's not my job. If that person's willing to change, however, then we can actually have some change. But sometimes certain individuals enter only to blame the other person, only to kind of find out the weaknesses of the other person. So I would say be careful with how a change is made. You know, make sure that that person is sincere about making change for themselves. Okay, not others, not to please others, not to fulfill anyone's expectations.
Indeed. Indeed. So, as we can see from our discussion today, that there's a lot of negativity towards narcissistic people. Some would even label them as bad people or anything like that. Like you said, turn around and run, right? Turn the other way and run. So, with when that's the narrative, how do we not only change that narrative, but more importantly, how do we show more compassion and kindness towards people who are struggling with narcissism?
I would say that narcissism is more of a disease that affects the people around them. So, typically not the narcissist who sees their behavior as a problem, it's everyone else around them. So, to those individuals, for them to have a sense of compassion and kindness, I would say that it takes time. It takes understanding. You can't be beaten and bruised by this person and have compassion at that moment. It's humanly impossible. Okay.
Yeah.
But I will say that after healing, after seeking justice, after protecting yourself, there comes a time where we try to seek truth and understand why did this person do this, and we need to accept and understand that only Allah is the judge. Only He decides who is good and bad, and He is the one who knows what's in our hearts. Okay. Uh, the term narcissism, I personally believe it's fundamentally flawed because I feel the way that it's used as a shaming device for people to protect themselves and play the victim. So a lot of folks will say, well, he or she was a narcissist. That's why our marriage failed. Or that's why I'm in the problem that I'm in. So it can draw the attention away from this
Right.
person. Okay. However, like you said earlier, it can also be a helpful label that we can use to classify a set of behaviors,
Hmm.
right? Instead of mentioning all these different characteristics, you can say, narcissistic tendencies. So, with that all in mind, we need to understand that there's healing needed on both sides. And yes, the folks who play the narcissist cause a lot of damage by being selfish and overprotective of themselves. But so do the people that they are paired with, who give in compulsively, who are socially programmed to normalize the abuse and pass it on to the next generation, who fail to protect themselves and the ones that they love, who passive aggressively try to get their needs met instead of being authentic, who submit to the will of their abuser but neglect submitting to the will of God. So I would say
Hmm.
there's still a lot of work to be done.
Yeah. That statement you said that we've been programmed to normalize the abuse. That just hits hard for me because being a product of abuse myself and the son of a abused woman, it's very, because the culture or I come from, it's very male dominated society or country actually, right? I'm from Somalia, and pretty much men run the show there, to the point that a woman can give birth and she wouldn't be allowed to name her own child.
Mhm.
It's the man's job, right? So that's the background, the cultural background, I guess, that I come from. And what I see myself is, because you said we are taught to normalize the abuse, I see women go to their parents and seek help. And that alone it takes a lot of courage and strength when you're trapped in that society where you have no rights. And then you find that courage to seek help.
Mhm.
That alone is monumental, right? And then your parents tell you to go back home
Yeah, or we
because you don't,
silence that voice, So when we finally gather the courage to
yeah,
voice our concerns, we're shamed and silenced.
absolutely. Because the, I guess the longevity of the marriage is more important than the quality or the health of the marriage. That's how they
Mhm.
view it. It's unfortunate. And that's why I asked you to come on the show to address this topic, because it is something that's, dear to me and near to my heart. And I always try to figure out how to educate myself, like you said earlier. How do we protect ourselves and educate ourselves? And I found that, and I could be wrong, I'm not the expert here, but I found that for me personally, control and power, it's like the center of it.
Mhm.
And once I realized that, I found that once you learn to let go of that control and not get attached to power, Allah gives you in its place khushu', right? Humility. And to me, that's like the humility is like the coolest thing. in the world for me personally, because that's how you, I guess, run relationships.
Yeah.
Yeah, the other way just destroys it. So
And that might be the antidote to narcissism.
yeah, definitely. But it's hard. It's hard. So it's
Hmm.
easier said than done.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So but I definitely want to thank you for your time. That was a beautiful episode. Is there anything you want to say, like any advice or recommendations, suggestions, anything?
Yeah, I recommend course therapy because I'm a therapist.
Hmm.
I am, able to provide therapy services for folks who are in the U.S. in qualifying states. Because of COVID, they're allowing us to speak to folks outside of our state, and I'm in
Okay.
Texas.
Oh, in
So
Texas.
yeah,
Okay.
so if anyone wants to reach out to me, they absolutely can. Um, I I have my page, Sukoon Circles. So sukoon.circles.com, or on Facebook, you can look up Sukoon Circles and book a therapy session. It's important that not just one person, that one family member goes, but it's important the entire family is going through therapy because, like I said, narcissism is not someone. It's not just a one person problem. It's a systemic problem.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Just like racism. Do go ahead, take advantage of our services. In terms of your designs, if anybody was interested in that, what is that about? What do you offer with the Rahman Designs?
Yeah. So I'm primarily a counselor, but when I get tired of talking with people, then I like
Like
to do
me,
outside therapy.
right?
So yeah, no, if you want to reach out to me, you can go to rahmandesigns.com. There's a contact form there. You can fill it out and we can see what we can do here.
Awesome, awesome. Well, you've been amazing, and this obviously has been or is one of my personal favorite episodes. But before we let you go, we like to close out the show with one final question, which is separate from the topic.
Okay.
Okay. That question is, what is your message to humanity?
Okay. Well, what I have learned, and this is what I tell myself, okay, is that we got to keep our mission in mind, the long term vision.
Hmm.
And that for me, the most important thing, the most important value is to continue to seek the truth and to live by the truth and spread the truth. Okay. And to always keep in mind that this world is temporary and everlasting comfort, perfection comes in the afterlife.
So I love it. I
Yeah.
love it. All right, folks, that's all for today. So normally I don't announce 2 weeks in advance. I only announce the next episode, but today we'll go ahead and announce the next 2 weeks because they're kind of intertwined together. So we have two amazing ladies coming joining the show the next 2 weeks, and we'll be addressing the process of spousal selection and traits we should look for. And then the following week, we'll go ahead and provide that platform if in case you are single, we'll help you out and find your the one for you. Inshallah. Until then, this is your host, King Abu saying so long and remember to treat each other with kindness. Goodbye.